Hi everyone, welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement. On today's video, well, there's something very big in this box, and I think it's going to be something very cool. Let's get right to it. What's in this package, which I can just barely get my arms around, was donated by Stuart out of New Hampshire here in the United States. It's definitely right up there with some of the biggest donations I've ever received on the channel. Well, at least ones that were shipped. So you don't just see my talking head appearing above this box. I'm going to move this down to the floor so we can get a better look of what's inside as I open it. I can already tell that Stuart's packing job was pretty great because the box is pretty heavy, but it's completely intact. I mean, it's a pretty thick box because this is a moving box, but nothing has shifted around in here. There's nothing loose feeling inside. So I'm pretty sure the contents of this box have survived without any issue. We have a note. Just a quick note to say thank you for a great channel and the joy it brings me when I get notifications of another video from you. With all the crazy things going on today, it's always nice to join you in your digital basement and enjoy the nostalgia of former days. The computers you feature are some of the ones I grew up with and sparked both my joy of technology and the love of tinkering, so thank you. However, while I have used many of the computers you feature, you are missing one that was a major mainstay of my youth, and probably the only Apple computer I used for an extended length of time. I learned touch typing with Mavis Beacon, which was involved in my first major detention and near expulsion, but a story for another time, and Logo, which was involved in another detention, also for another time. But mostly remember spending all my time on the computer lab playing Oregon Trail, Bard's Tale, and Ultima for hours on end. Aside from watching YouTube videos, I'm also spending my COVID summer building out a better home office in the basement. Since it gets pretty cold here, I had to insulate and figured I could get rid of my extra insulation by mailing it to you. If anything else fell into the box while I was packing it, no returns. Keep up the great work, Stuart. P.S. A shout out to my wonderful New Hampshire ladies. That is awesome, Stuart. So I grew up in Montreal, Canada, and Montreal is not that far from New England. I am very familiar with freezing cold winters, and it's definitely one of the reasons why I live on the West Coast now. I really am not a fan of snow. It's pretty for a very brief period of time, and then it melts, and that's what we deal with here in Oregon. So people may have noticed this shiny stuff on the walls in my basement. It's not just to kind of reflect the light or whatever. It's actually insulation, 1-inch thick foam, and I thought that the silver side looked better than the white side that had writing all over it. So that's what you guys see. But that insulation keeps me nice and warm down here in the digital basement in the winter. So even though it might be, a few degrees above freezing outside, it's nice and toasty down here. Okay, let's check out what Stuart sent. So I recognize this stuff. This is that similar insulation to the stuff I have on the walls here. It just doesn't have that shiny metallic coating on it. So let's see what's in here. Look at this. This is really cool. This is like Apple level of packing, like little pull cords to lift it out of the box. Okay, another nice piece of foam. Excellent. Okay, we're getting to things, something that's plastic there. Let's see what's in this side right here. This is like opening one of those Russian dolls. You never know when you're going to actually get to the center. Oh, okay. This is going to give a clue, I think, to people what's inside this box. So that was one original Apple II disk drive, and here is another one. This one says drive 1, and the other one says drive 2. This is really some of the most amazing packing I've ever seen, Stuart. Wow, look at this. You even cut these pieces to fit around what is obviously a little monitor here. All right, so here we have a small Panasonic monitor with little slider controls, and it says dual mode computer display, color or character. So this is a color monitor, and it's so small and cute. Yeah, you could see the filth of what the monitor left behind. Let's take these sheets out. All right, let's peel this up. And we have another purple foam piece with a little pull string. Stuart, amazing packing, really. And here we go. And there we go. There it is. Apple II Plus. Ooh, these are interesting little connections on the back. I wonder what these are. Look at this attention to detail. Stuart cut out these pieces on this foam here, so when it sat on the back of the computer, it wouldn't put pressure on those two port expansion things on the back of the computer. Wow, I'm kind of at a loss for words here. Stuart, this was so incredibly generous of you to send this all the way from New Hampshire to the West Coast here. I'm really blown away. I really am. And I normally have so much to say, but I'm just amazed, and I'm so grateful. This is amazing. What's really special about the Apple II Plus to me is it's very similar to your story in that while the II Plus wasn't my first computer, my father bought me a VIC-20 back in 1982. It wasn't soon after that he bought a used Apple II Plus fully decked out with CPM card, 80 columns, a modem, 2 printers, Daisy Wheel dot matrix, Amber monitor, a whole setup. And that was the family computer. So the VIC-20 was for me personally to use, and the II Plus was for everyone to use. And I've soon figured out that I much preferred the Apple II Plus over the VIC-20. Even though the II Plus was older than the VIC-20, and I got to give Commodore credit for making such a great, inexpensive computer for the masses, which the VIC-20 was. But the II Plus, with the expansion slots, was very powerful, and ours having 80 columns or whatnot allowed some good word processing and BBSing with 80 column screen. And then, of course, there were all sorts of disk-based games. I just had a cassette drive on my VIC-20. So ultimately, I loved the II Plus. I had so much fun with that computer. So the third computer I ended up getting that my father bought me was an Apple IIc. And he could see how much I loved the II Plus and programming on it and BBSing and all that stuff, that he got me a IIc, and that was to replace my VIC-20. I really have to give my father props. I was just a kid. I was 7 years old when I got that VIC-20. So he took a leap thinking that that would be good for his son. And look at what's happened. I make YouTube videos about these old computers now in my 40s. So clearly that had a positive effect on me. In fact, my entire career has been working in information technology, basically around computers. So that decision to get that VIC-20 and then to buy that Apple II Plus really kickstarted my journey into technology that still is going super strong today. Now, while I have other Apple IIs, including the Franklin Ace-1000, which you guys have seen on the channel now, I don't have an Apple II Plus. And it's definitely been a computer that I have been looking for quite a long time. And I have such fond memories of this old tank-like computer. And Stuart, it was almost like you were reading my mind that I was looking for one of these, and none have ever fallen into my lap for a reasonable price. Otherwise, I probably would have bought one by now. But I just haven't had that luck. You know, I picked up the Franklin Ace-1000 instead of the II Plus. But now I have this. I feel like this crazy nostalgia, warm feeling inside. Now, the only thing, of course, that's different on this one has a color screen. We only ever had an Amber Zenith branded computer display, never anything color on the Apple II Plus. In fact, my IIc had a monochrome 9-inch Apple screen, so I never really saw color graphics on the Apple II until later when my father actually bought me, because I begged him, a color monitor so I could plug that into my IIc. Anyway, like for Stuart, the II Plus has a really special place in my heart. In fact, his stories about using it in school and getting into trouble aren't that different than mine. My elementary school in Montreal, I went to one in NDG called Wellington, and they had a small computer lab with like 4 or 5 Apple II Pluses. And because, of course, we had an Apple II Plus at home at that time, well, I signed up for the computer lab, of course, because I knew it was going to be an easy grade, because I already was very familiar with basic programming from the VIC-20 and then the Apple II Plus as well, not to mention just using the system as a whole. So we had a lot of stuff to do in Logo in that class, and I'm sure I knew more about how to program the Apple II Plus than the teacher that was running the lab. And I remember the Logo stuff I used to do was basically way beyond like the little simple exercises they had you doing, drawing circles and stuff like that. I used to do subroutines and all sorts of stuff like that. And yeah, I think I remember playing games at lunchtime in the computer lab. Even though I had a computer at home I could play games on as well, it was just a fun way to spend time at school. Now, I personally never got into trouble for the computer lab. I got into trouble for other things. don't really remember the exact details, but I know I got sent to the principal's office more than once at that school. But yeah, like I had really fond memories of using the 2 Plus at home and in school. It's such a cool machine. This era of Apple is so fundamentally different than the one we're in right now with Apple. This computer, they encouraged you to open it, to get your hands in there with the circuits, to modify it, to add expansion cards, to do what you wanted with this computer that you bought. Now, of course, you buy an Apple device like an iPhone, iPad, or even one of their computers, and it's like hands off, don't even open this thing up. We're going to make it as hard as possible to open. Maybe some of the bigger desktops, you can add RAM to it, and that's it. Forget about swapping chips out, hot wiring in, doing mods to the keyboard to support lowercase, you know, all that kind of fun stuff that you could do on these things. Anyways, enough about that ranting. Let's take a closer look at this Apple II Plus. Okay, so clearly this stuff is in good need of a good deep cleaning. There's a little scratches here and there on things, but overall, I think the condition, it looks really good. I'm going to move the monitor off to the side. I haven't personally ever seen a monitor like this, so I'll be really curious to see if it still works and how good it is. All right, so there it is. There's that Apple II Plus logo. It looks like it's in nice shape. The overall computer just all looks like it's in good shape. Not sure on the lid here if these are scratches or what, but hopefully that cleans up. But I can see by these spaces here that probably originally whoever was using this had the disk drive set up on top of the case, kind of like this, and then they placed the monitor on top of this. Now this was a pretty common setup that a lot of people did, but Apple did say that they did not recommend you stacking monitors on top of the disk drives. And that's because the disk drives don't really fit well on the lid, so it's not a very stable platform, although this actually is pretty stable. But yeah, ideally, Apple wanted you to set the disk drives up to the side like this, and there's plenty of length on the cables to make their way into the disk controller card, and then you set the monitor on top of the computer. Either that, or you stack the two disk drives on top of each other like this, and then you would take and put a small 9-inch CRT off to the side here. So what is an Apple II Plus compared to a regular Apple II? Well, really, pretty much nothing. There's some slight differences to the keyboard that Apple installed in here. Specifically, this is the power LED on the Apple II Plus, and on the original Apple II, it protruded and looked more like a key. It still lit up, but it just looked a little different. So I think they use a different manufacturer. Other than different ROMs installed on the motherboard, and I think some very minor tweaks and revisions, there's basically no difference. So you could take a regular Apple II, like without the Plus, add the Apple II Plus ROMs to it, and it would become an Apple II Plus. I'm in no way an expert on the exact differences, so I'm sure there are going to be some viewers of mine that probably know a lot more, and they'll put some interesting comments in the comment section below. But yeah, like there was very, very minor differences between the two. And I think the Apple II Plus came out pretty soon after the original Apple II. Basically, the biggest thing to the end user was that when you turn the computer on, it would drop into AppleSoft Basic instead of the older Integer Basic, and it would also auto-boot your disk drive. So if you had a disk controller in there and you turn the computer on, it would automatically boot the disk drive. While the original ROMs would just drop you into machine language monitor, I think. I'm not fully sure of that. I think pretty quickly Apple II machines that existed out there got the new ROM upgrade to bring them up to the Apple II Plus specs with the auto-booting, stuff like that. So let me open the lid on this thing, and let's take a look at what's in here exactly. Oh, neat. Stuart had installed a piece of foam in here just to keep these cards from coming loose and banging around. I mean, that is a possibility. So one thing about the Apple II and the II Plus, there's no slot bracket to hold the cards in. The cards are strictly held in by these slots and nothing more. So like if I just move this like here, this is an original disk controller card, it just comes right out. So right away in the II Plus, you see the beauty of this architecture. It's got 8 expansion slots from 0 to 7. And basically Apple encouraged you to go in this thing and install adapter cards. In addition, the RAM was right here. So say you had a machine that only had 16K of RAM, well, you could just buy the RAM chips and install them yourself. Now, they probably wanted you to go to a dealer, but clearly it takes 2 seconds to pop the lid off. So how hard would it be to install your own RAM chips? The ROM upgrade is similarly easy. These are the ROM chips right here. So if you bought the Apple II Plus ROMs and you had an original Apple II, pop the lid, pop the new chips in, boom, you have an Apple II Plus. So let's take a look at the expansion cards that are in here. So like I said, this was the disk controller card, the original Apple one. I don't know if this is a 13 sector or a 16 sector one, but I guess we'll find out when I try this machine. Now, this blue cable that goes to this rear adapter is the joystick port on the inside here, and this goes to a standard DB9. So the original Apple II, and ours was like this at home, you had a joystick and it would come through this little hole in the case and you plugged it into this IC socket. Basically, the end of the cable had what looked like an IC, bunch of pins on it, and you had to plug that in. It was all very delicate. It was easy to break. So I guess it was a pretty common upgrade. We never had this, but to go from the IC socket with the ribbon cable onto the back of the machine using a standard DB9. On the Apple IIe and all the later machines like the 2C and the 2GS, it had the DB9 port there for plugging in joysticks more easily. And actually, I have an Apple II joystick, and that is the connector it has on it. So that's great. I can actually use that with this thing. All right, so this card here, which also has a thing plugged into the back of the case. I wonder if I can slide this out. Oh, there we go. And this is an Apple branded card. In fact, oh, nice. It's the Apple Super Serial Card 2. So this is excellent. It just gives you a serial port on the back of the machine. And this would allow me to use a program like ADT Pro to make floppy disks on this computer. So very handy. And I happen to have a couple parallel cards, like the Grappler cards, that would go in here and let you hook up a printer to it as well. Now, as a kid, we had, I don't know if it was the Apple Super Serial card because I didn't know a whole lot about, what these cards were, but we had an external modem, so it was definitely plugged into the Apple II Plus using a card similar to this. And then finally, what we have here is the Apple II Plus language card. Now, I need to be careful about this because it's actually plugged into the motherboard with this ribbon cable, but this is a Microsoft branded card, and what this gives the Apple II Plus is a total of 64K. The motherboard only supports 48K of RAM on board, and then the ROMs sit in that upper address space normally. But with this card, what this gives you the ability to do is to bank switch out the ROM chips, and then you have this 64K where you can load in a different version of BASIC. So this motherboard has AppleSoft BASIC, but if you wanted to run the older integer BASIC, the one that was from the original Apple II, then you would load that off a disk into this RAM, and then it would become as if it was the ROM. And that would allow you to run those old integer BASIC programs. I'm sure I have viewers, again, that are more knowledgeable about this, the technical details of this, and the history of the language card here. So please put comments in the comment section so other people can see that information. Now, taking a look at the motherboard, everything looks absolutely great in here. It's a little dusty, of course, which is expected. This is an old computer, but the condition of everything in here is great. I don't see any corrosion. Things look fantastic. And what's really handy back then in this day and age is every single chip is in a socket. Now, this may or may not be a good thing. Sometimes the sockets get dirty, sometimes they get corroded, sometimes the contact is flaky. That can produce an unreliable machine. It makes for easy servicing, though, because you can pull chips out of there very easily. And if you watch other people's Apple II Plus troubleshooting videos, like 8-Bit Guy, when he got the Bell & Howell Apple II Plus, he didn't know which chip was bad, so I think he went to a friend's house and they just started swapping out every chip one by one and testing them until they figured out which one is bad. So the first thing I want to do to the Apple II Plus is completely superficial and cosmetic, but it'll make me feel better. I want to give this thing a thorough cleaning on the outside, which of course means using my favorite cleaner Windex here to just give this thing a good wipe down. The whole thing is grimy. I mean, it is a very old computer, and it was probably sitting around in who knows where. So, yep, a good cleaning is what's happening next. Really, when you're cleaning one of these old machines, you just use some elbow grease and a soft microfiber cloth and lots of Windex or something else for cleaning. When it's really grimy and it has a textured plastic, I then break out a magic eraser, and that really helps get the dirt out of the little tiny indentations in the texture. But I do always start with a cloth and Windex and clean as much of the dirt off as I can. I don't go straight to the magic eraser. You have to be careful with magic eraser not to rub too hard though, because you can actually rub the texture off the plastic. So you want to have a light touch with it, just enough to get the dirt off, but don't go too far. For the disk drives, the case is metal, so you don't have to worry as much about the magic eraser, but you could also take the paint off. So again, you don't want to rub too hard. The ribbon cables were quite dirty, so I sprayed Windex on them and then I just rubbed them down with a microfiber cloth and that cleaned them right up. Front bezels were dirty as well, but a little bit of cleaning with Windex, they cleaned right up. Some 303 aerospace protectant, which I didn't apply here, would make those faceplates really shiny black again, like as if they were brand new. The monitor was relatively grimy and a lot of the dirt, especially on the top, was pretty hard to get off and actually wasn't being affected at all by the microfiber cloth. I had to use a magic eraser on the top especially to try to make a dent getting that stuff off. There were a few little scuff marks on the front bezel of the monitor that just weren't coming off with the magic eraser. So I broke out the baking soda, which is a trick I learned from 8-Bit Guy, and it actually took the scuff marks right off without affecting the texture. Well, I always find cleaning very satisfying, and I'm really happy with how this machine turned out, even just with a quick surface clean. This machine still needs a deep clean, don't get me wrong, where I'll be disassembling everything and really giving it a good deep clean, but just cleaning the outside really makes it look a whole lot better and makes it a lot nicer to potentially use. Like the way it was, every time you touched it, your hands just came back dirty. But now you want to actually touch it. You want to feel the 1970s of this computer, the late 70s that is. Just take a look at how awesome this badge is. Look at that, Apple II. Look at that cool font, plus in green. It's so cool. The badge is in pretty good shape. There's like a small scratch along the top. You might not be able to see in the camera, and it seems like it's popped up a little bit, so the glue's coming off when I push on it. Under the Apple there, which is sort of raised up. The whole thing has a kind of an embossed look to it, and I can just see a little bit of a lighter space behind the Apple. I'm not sure what's going on there, but it's minor considering the age of this computer. I'm wondering what's going on here. So this is the power light for the computer. There's actually a little incandescent light bulb behind there, but it normally says power right on there. And I wonder if someone who was nervous maybe scratched it off or something, or maybe it was just a sticker, but I can see that it's slightly lighter where the word power was originally versus the rest of the slightly yellowed plastic of this power light here. Now this is the top of the disk drive, and this is metal, and it's painted. But I find it really odd that there seems to be some yellowing in the paint itself, and then we have two lighter spots on this disk drive, probably where a monitor or something was sitting on top of it. And the same thing has happened to the other disk drive. There's actually just one spot on that one, and it's sort of a weird spot. So what would explain the fact that the paint itself has seemingly darkened, and then there are a couple actual lighter spots? It's just weird. With just some light cleaning, both of these disk drives look really nice. They mechanically open and close all right. They don't seem broken at all, which goes without saying. These are Shugart SA390 mechanisms, or they should be at least, and these are just very, very reliable mechanisms. Shugart was really a pioneer in disk drive technology. In fact, I think they're the originators of the 5 1/4 inch disk drive format entirely. Well, hopefully this is coming across on the camera, but on the top of the 2 Plus, there is definitely some yellowing again with some light spots. There are 4 light spots right here, which again, I think come from the disk drives that we're probably sitting on here. There's also strangely a lighter spot on the case right here, and I can't really explain that. Now, what I'm not sure about is if this machine is painted or this is plastic that I could retrobrite. I'm kind of believing now that it's painted, and it's probably the same paint that's on the disk drives here, which is why it's seemingly yellowed in exactly the same way. Like the color of the yellowing looks identical on both, especially where the feet were sitting and it's lighter, which I guess means I'm stuck with this slight yellowing on the top, but these lighter spaces here from where something was sitting on the machine. If you have insight into what's going on here about paint or if it's plastic and I can retrobrite it, please put comments in the comment section below. I'm really curious about that. Okay, I think I've done enough waffling about cleaning and the condition of the case. I want to see if this thing works. Now, I would normally just turn things on. Everyone knows how cavalier I can be about that. But I know for a fact that there are Rifa capacitors in this power supply, and Rifas are my nemesis. If you saw my recent Franklin Ace 1000 videos, they like to blow. And I just rather avoid the stench in here. So I think I should just take this power supply out and replace those filter caps. Okay, I'm going to be flipping the computer over, so I'll put down my funky towel. Okay, a couple interesting things to notice. So there are 2 screws missing off the front. There is a screw head broken off right here, and there is one missing from there. So I take it someone has been into this computer at least one time before. Here's the model number, A2S10148, 48K, serial number A2S2127511. Well, I've never actually worked on a 2 Plus, but I assume it's very similar to the Franklin with these 4 screws that you can remove the power supply. Okay, just don't want to strip these out. There you go. Screw heads are a little rusty, actually. Bottom of the computer looks like it's powder coated, and it's fine. But these screws on the power supply, and actually, I guess all the rest of them, yep, they don't look so great. They are some kind of galvanized metal or something, but the heads are very discolored. Let's unplug the power supply from the motherboard, and we'll get this thing out of here. All right, so a pretty standard Apple II power supply. I'm just gonna give this a little wipe. It's pretty dirty on the top. There's a serial number and date code. It's hard to read, but the date code is 8325, so 25th week of 1983. This is a pretty late manufactured Apple II Plus. 1983, I'm gonna have to go look that up to see what that is. Now, is this thing riveted together? There are screws along the bottom here, but then what are these? Are these rivets? Well, that would be annoying. I hate drilling out rivets. Let's get the screws out, and we'll see what exactly is going on. I'm noticing this hilarious sticker. Under no circumstances is this case to be open. This power supply is not user serviceable, and there are dangerous high voltages inside. In case of difficulty, I need to notify Apple Computer. You know, can I take this to the Genius Bar and say that there's some smoky caps in here that are going to blow up and stink up my entire house? What do you think they'll do with that? On the business end of the power supply, you see Apple Computer Incorporated, Aztec Power Supply. They are the manufacturer, or at least the designer of this power supply, which is 115 volts, 50 or 60 hertz. We have the IEC power input and a power switch. Now, one thing about the Apple II that was different about the triad of the 1977 computers, the TRS-80 Model 1 and the PET 2001-8, was that the PET and the TRS-80 both used transformers and then linear voltage regulators, which basically generate a ton of heat and are very inefficient. Meanwhile, Apple decided to put a switching power supply, which runs far cooler. Notice there's not even a fan anywhere on here. It's like a sealed box and is much more efficient. So pretty cool that they were ahead of their time, at least for the more inexpensive side of 8-bit microcomputers at the time. Okay, so I thought it had rivets, but it looks like with those screws out, the bottom cover just pops off. And there is the switching power supply. What a neat design. I can see a Rifa hiding out right down there, ready to blow. Well, I'll just kind of smoothly scroll past here so you see all the components. High quality caps, I'm sure. Oh, I wonder why this one is green while the rest are black or this dark brown color. Maybe someone's replaced that. I'm gonna have to pull the board out of here so I'll be able to see if there's been rework on that one cap. But yeah, nice. I can see that the screws that hold this board in are gunked. So I would say this board has never been pulled out of this chassis before. So this is a virgin power supply. So that one different color cap must just have been the way it was made. So it was good to mark the component you're gonna take out so you don't actually take out the wrong thing. I am taking out the Rifa, which is right there. Sorry, my bad. I just heated up the 2 legs of the cap and I pulled it out. It was off camera a little bit. So here is the Rifa cap. People have asked, why do I keep saying Rifa? Well, right there, it's Rifa brand cap.
And there we go, 0.1 microfarad. And as this one has never been powered up while it's old, if I had plugged it in, what happens is these start to leak. In other words, they start to short. And it doesn't happen kind of immediately. It happens little by little. And this is installed between the live and the neutral lines, which means that basically this is right across 120 volts here in the US. And as it starts to leak, it starts to conduct current. So it starts to get hot, basically, and it gets worse and worse. It starts a cascade failure where it gets hotter and hotter and leaks more and more until it just completely shorts out and literally spews its liquid and gas all over the place, creates all that smoke. So this is the new capacitor that I'm going to be installing. Notice the size difference, but it's 0.1 microfarad and it's X2 class. There's a little X2 on there. It's probably hard to see, but that's the current safety ratings. Before they were X and now they're X2. If you take out an X cap, you can put in a Y cap or an X cap in its place. But if you're changing out a Y cap, which is a different type of safety cap, you have to replace it with another Y cap. Do not use an X cap in place of a Y cap. And that's because Y caps are used when you go between live and earth ground, not live and neutral. And the reason why that matters is because if you, say, plug this computer in with a two-prong plug, like you break off the ground lead, and you're using not a Y cap, and it starts to leak, it will leak that 120 volts into the chassis ground, into the metal of the computer, which of course you can touch. And that's where it can become dangerous. You can conduct that power to ground. And unless you have a RCD or a GFCI that will trip because it will detect that leakage, it's not safe, right? So that's the real reason. It's interesting because there are actually two holes here, two different sizes for a smaller cap. So it might have actually worked without reforming these leads. But what I did is I bent those leads to be the same size as the original cap. And there's the new cap installed. Okay, so I did a visual inspection. Everything looks good on here. I don't see any leaking caps or anything that looks out of the ordinary. I have put the board back in. I made sure all the clearance and everything is connected over here. And I just want to power this up without the computer plugged in. It's probably not going to work properly. Most of these old switching power supplies require a load on them to operate normally. So I don't expect this thing to actually fully work, but I just want to make sure it doesn't explode or something. And let's bring over the multimeter here. And I'm going to hold this on to what I think is 5 volts. I think it's either that or 12. Here we go. Hey, yeah, 5.2 volts. Not bad. And it's actually switching. It's not exploding. That's a good sign. The voltage was a little high, but I'm not too concerned about that. Now I'm on the 12 volt rail and it's 12.2. Okay, whoops, I'm losing contact. Yeah, 12.2, and that's okay. So I'm glad to see things are looking pretty normal. Let's just check the other ones. -5 is close to -5, and this should be -12, and -11.3, that's good enough. Excellent, so now I feel confident enough to put the lid back on and close this thing up. Ooh, that's kind of gross. There's a lot of dead looking bugs in there, so I'm gonna try to clean that out a little bit. Okay, that's a lot better. Now remember I said that I'm taking this thing apart again to do a full deep cleaning. I'm gonna fully disassemble the computer. I'm very impatient and I wanna see if this thing works. So I'm going to loosely fit this in here. I'm not even gonna screw it in the bottom, since I will be taking this computer apart again anyway, because I am very curious to see if this computer actually works. All right, the moment of truth. I only have the language card installed, so it will, if it works, it's just gonna say Apple II and go to the basic prompt. TV is on, I'll just double check that. Yep, it is. And here we go. Will this work? No. All right, let's just try that one more time. We have all question marks with no beep. There's a close-up of the screen. If I turn the computer off and back on again, we just go straight to question marks. But take a look at the incandescent power light. That does work. Although too bad it doesn't say power on it. But anyhow, that's awesome. So I'm going to leave you there with a cliffhanger on a non-working Apple II Plus. A huge thank you to Stuart for sending this machine in to me. Again, I can't thank him enough. What an incredibly generous donation.
I can't wait to dive in and fix this computer because it's so serviceable. It's begging to be fixed. So anyway, watch for a part 2 video where I take this thing apart fully and then fix this thing, hopefully. And yeah, that's gonna be it. So if you like this video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. But if you didn't, you know what to do. Hit that thumbs down button. Press the subscribe button if you want to subscribe to my channel and the little bell icon to be notified when I upload new videos. And then finally, put your comments and your questions in the comment section below. And that's gonna be it. Stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.